Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Let's just give everybody a moment to log in as more attendees are joining. We'll wait a minute, please. Okay, so let's kick this webinar off. So thank you very much for joining today to today's webinar: Fashion Brands Compliance, Trending Regulatory Developments. Today's webinar is presented by Analytical Group and Compliance and Risks. Despite this being a very focused topic, we have a strong attendance, and we're really excited with the prospect of working with all of the companies that are in attendance today. Before we begin, we just have one little housekeeping announcement to make. Everybody will be on mute during the call. You will have the opportunity to ask questions via the questions section in the GoToWebinar box on your screen, and hopefully at the end of the session we also try and open up questions to the audience. If we don't get a chance to answer your question directly today, we will certainly reply by email in the coming days. You will also receive a copy of the presentation and a recording of the presentation. So again, thank you for joining. Okay. So today's team presenting to you will be Mattia Armelli, who is the Commercial Director of Analytical Group. There's myself, Sean Murphy, who is a Business Development Director with Compliance and Risks. And the most important person on the call is Maria Marecki, who is a Senior Regulatory Consultant with Compliance and Risks. There's a little bio-up here about Maria. Maria has expertise in product safety and labeling, and has more than 10 years experience working in apparel, children's products, food contact materials, electronics, and medical devices. So vastly experienced. So just a couple of slides here about compliance and risks and who we are. So we're an Irish company, headquarters here in Cork in Ireland. We've about 110 people globally, and our aim is to help our clients to manage regulations and standards and all other requirements to help better mitigate a risk. It's all about protecting the brand, your brand, making sure that you're putting compliant product on the market in time. So to help you do that, we have one particular core product, and that core product is called C2P. C2P stands for compliance to product. It's essentially, it's a SaaS-based tool that houses thousands of regulations and standards from all around the world. And on top of the regulations and standards module within the tool, it's also got a module for requirements and evidence. So we're helping companies to manage the product, everything from R&D right through to launching, and keeping a full track of requirements and evidence and the lifespan of the product in the C2P platform. The most important thing about the C2P platform, and I will show it very, very briefly at the end of the end of today's presentation, is that it's real-time information. So you're not waiting for somebody to hand you a report. It's real-time information that our regulatory team are updating on a daily basis. Okay, enough about compliance and risks. I'm now going to hand you over to Mattia. And Mattia is our partner in Italy. And Mattia will just give you a brief couple of minutes about who it is that Analytical are.
Thank you very much, Sean. and good morning to everybody. I'm Mattia Armelli from Analytical Group, and I will try to share with you my screen right now. Hope that you see it. So, as I said, Sean, we are a partnership with compliance risks since a long time, and today we decided to organize this webinar to let our customer understand better, and maybe the customer of compliance risk better, what we can offer together as a 360 degrees solution for compliance and regulatory. So a very quick overview about our group today. We are a Italian-based company. We have more than 40 years of expertise on testing and certification right now, and we have different locations and for testing and certification in Italy and around the world. We are very focusing right now on testing and on electronic devices and food devices, environmental part, and the support, of course, for fashion brands, sport goods brand, and all the kind of typology of brands that can produce goods about fashion right now. So we have different type of services, of course. As you can see some of the type of service that we can give to the brands right now, including the vendors training and compliance part. And this is very important, mainly for the worldwide brands that need to update the vendors worldwide. We can give them an online courses and all the typology of the services for all the supply chain right now. And sometimes we find out that even if you are updated about compliance in the fantastic way, for example, with C2P, sometimes there is a lack about information, technical information, and how this regulation impacts on the product. And that's the reason why we have a technical support dedicated for the brands in cooperation, of course, with the compliance risks. So we base our services on 3 pillars mainly, which is the first one is the innovation. So we believe in 4.0 consulting approach and testing approach. The second one, of course, is expertise. We try to give our best as a top-in-class services for our customer as a top expertise in the market on fashion, and then the passion, of course, because we really love what we do, and here in Italy we try to do our best to services worldwide the brands. So here in Italy we have 3 mainly locations for fashion, close to production for luxury brands and for the materials and type of the production, not just luxury, of course, but all the type of production mainly in Italy are divided between Vicenza and Arzignano zone for the leather, Padua for the shoes, and Tuscany for leather goods and leather mainly, but not limited to. So we try to put the location close to our customers. And we have a global partnership here with GTTC, which is in China and Asia mainly, and we can reach more than 2K people around the world, and we provide more than 3 million tests every year. So we have an extensive proficiency and capability of testing around the world, and we have a location based mainly in Asia and Europe, of course. So our partnership with compliance risk is very important for us, and it's since 2014. Time flies, Sean, and we start to understand together how we can create a complete and comprehensive services for fashion brands, because we understand that even if the brands, as I said before, are on alert, for example, for some new regulation that comes out in China, GB standard, for example, sometimes they don't understand really well how impact. And this is the how impact on supply chain, how impact on the product, for chemicals compliance, for physical, mechanical quality tests. And this is the our part. So we decide to put everything together in one offer, and we create these compliance fashion packs. The compliance fashion packs is a pack that we offer in partner with compliance risks that give to you the compliance consulting, of course, the C2P software, and our technical support on your products, and of course the testing part. So it's very comprehensive, and it can be very helpful for you and for your supply chain around the world. So as you can see, this is a quick recap on what we can do. On the left, you can see the typical kind of product where we can work on it. And on the right, you can see all the services that we can give to you about this kind of products. So it's very comprehensive, and it's about a lot of diversity of typology of the product. So this is very quick presentation about our group and our partnership with compliance risk. I will give the words to Maria, which is, I hope, is waiting for me to close this and to switch to Maria for the real presentation about the compliance. Thank you very much, everybody.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes,
yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining me here today. As I said, we're going to take a look at some regulatory developments for apparel, footwear, and accessories from this year so far. So let me just start a little slow. Okay. So here in the US, there's been a proposal about online country of origin labeling. And this bill would require a few things: an indication of the country of origin labeling for a product as required by existing law, and it be clearly and conspicuously stated in the website's description of the product. The bill also references disclosures from a few other laws, like the Textile Fiber Product Identification Act, the Wool Products Labeling Act, and the Fur Products Labeling Act. And it would also require a clear disclosure of the country in which the seller of the product is located, and if applicable, the country in which any parent corporation of the seller is located in the listing. There has been a little movement on this. It passed the Senate on June 8th, but it would still need to pass the House of Representatives and be signed by the President to be put into law. In California, the Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment believes that there needs to be limits to the use of the short form warnings for consumer products for Prop 65. So when Prop 65 labeling requirements were being amended a few years ago, the regulation did not limit the application of the short form warning to a maximum label surface area. And the short form warning was only really meant to be used for small products or containers. However, they've noticed in the past few years that companies are putting the short form warning on products where there's plenty of labeling room, or that the short form warning is also being placed on some products even when the business has no knowledge of an exposure to a listed chemical that would require a warning. So the proposed rulemaking would only allow the use of the short form warning on products with 5 square inches or less of label space, eliminate these warnings for internet and catalogs, and you would have to have at least one chemical named. And they show an example of what the new short form warning would look like. This was proposed back in January, and comments were extended for a while until about the end of March, so we're still waiting for an update on this. On May 18th, the Estonian Minister of Enterprise and Information Technology issued a regulation regarding labeling of clothing footwear requirements. So the previous version of this regulation was just the clothing and textile labeling requirements, and they put the footwear requirements of Directive 9411 in the annexes. And their textile labeling requirements go beyond the EU, so they do require things like care labeling. For their regulation, you need to have the product, the name of the product, if the absence of it may mislead the consumer, information on the size, the maintenance and care instructions, the type of material, if it's leather, and the species of the animal, if it's fur. They also recommend the use of those 2 Estonian standards for care and size, but you can use equivalents. Denmark put out an executive order on labeling of footwear and textile products. Now, this was done because of Regulation 2019-1020 on market surveillance. That actual regulation was implemented in their Act on Product and Market Surveillance. But because of that, they had to make changes to the actual textile and footwear regulations. So now the rules of labeling and footwear textile products are brought together in one executive order and replace the other 2. They also detail the obligations of the manufacturer, authorized representative, importer, and retailer. Regarding the market surveillance, they make the rules for the violations and the fines, and they state that the Danish Safety Technology Authority is in charge of this. So because of the regulation on market surveillance, it seems like other EU member states might change their rules a little bit. Finland actually put out a similar draft just at the beginning of this month, where they're proposing something similar, like putting the rules for footwear and textiles together in one and then adding the market surveillance requirements in there. In May, the Dutch State Secretary announced extended producer responsibility for textiles. This means that manufacturers of clothing will be responsible for the collection, recycling, reusing, and waste of the products they bring to the market. Manufacturers will also be responsible for the cost. Fashion chains will be responsible for collecting and recycling of discarded clothing. There will be, they say, an exemption for small entrepreneurs. This is expected to enter into force January 1st, 2023, but that's not a final date yet. They said in the next year, they're going to work out what this looks like, what collection looks like, and what the rates will be. Israel published a regulation which essentially bans the trade of fur for fashion. So in Israel, if you want to sell fur, it's only permitted by those who have a permit issued by the Nature and Parks Authority. Now, with this new amendment, there's only going to be a few exceptions where that's allowed, like scientific, religious, educational purposes. This is going to enter into force towards the beginning of December. Still in Israel, they propose a change to their mandatory standard on jewelry requirements for children, and basically they're adopting the latest ASTM on children's jewelry. There are some changes. The changes mostly have to do with, looks like changes in references and standards, references to standards and regulations. The Netherlands is looking to amend their precious metal marking rules, as they think that the rules on composite objects are not clear enough. So as they explain it, there could be a situation where somebody puts a ring on the market and it has the thinnest layer of gold on it, but it meets the requirement, and they can sell it as a gold article. So they're going to change the law to prohibit traders from placing composite articles on the market where it is not clearly known that that's what they are. In January 2020, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution in India announced mandatory hallmarking for gold articles. This involves a requirement that manufacturers, importers, wholesalers, distributors, and retailers engaged in selling these precious metal articles have to mandatorily register with the Bureau of Indian Standards. Gold articles have to comply with the Indian standard. And they've changed the enforcement date on this a few times, and they did so again in June. So in June, they put out an order stating that this was going to be mandatory from June 16th on, and they list 256 districts of the country where it was it's going to be mandatory, and it's for 14 karat, 18 and 22 karat gold. They have noted that because there's a high demand from jewelers to increase the grades of gold purity for hallmarking, they will issue eventually an amendment to the Indian standard that will allow for other grades such as 20 and 24 karat. As of April, these standards listed here are to be used as a test methods for demonstrating the conformity of articles under entry 27 of Annex 17 to REACH, and at entry 27 is the one about nickel restrictions, in particular articles intended to come into direct and prolonged contact with the skin, like jewelry and watches. Health Canada published a notice to stakeholders on the use of flame retardant chemicals in products in Canada. The purpose of the notice was to encourage manufacturers and importers to achieve compliance with the flammability performance requirements set out under the regulations to the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act without using flame retardants. Health Canada encourages regulated parties to voluntarily disclose the chemicals used in the products they supply, including any flame retardant chemicals, when it's requested by individuals such as distributors or retailers or the public. And they encourage the use of alternatives, including the use of inherently flame-resistant materials like wool or chemical-free barrier system, or a combination of these or other measures. And they've put out a document for manufacturers about alternatives. Nevada just made a law about flame retardants. So the law prohibits, with certain exceptions, the knowing manufacture, sale, or offering for sale of a children's product that contains any flame retardant organohalogenated chemical in any product component in an amount greater than 1,000 parts per million. And this applies to other products too, like upholstered residential furniture, residential textiles, business textiles, and mattresses. That's how they define flame retardants in this case. And children's product means a product primarily designed or intended by a manufacturer to be used for a child, and that's under 12 years of age. And the exceptions to this new rule are things like toys that fall under the ASTM standard, medical devices, consumer electronics, sleeping bags, and tents. In March, the Oregon Health Authority published Phase 3 of the Toxic Free Kids Act. So going back for a second, Phase 1 established the list of high priority chemicals of concern for children's health, and Phase 2 detailed manufacturer reporting requirements. Now Phase 3 establishes requirements for manufacturers to either remove the high priority chemicals from a product or substitute them with an alternative to make the products less hazardous, or to have a waiver approved by the authority by January 1st, 2022. This applies to products for children under 3, mouthable items as they define it in their regulation, and children's cosmetics. There are currently 68 chemicals designated as high priority chemicals of concern for children's health. So it includes things that you would be expecting on the list: formaldehyde, BPA, BPS, phthalates, flame retardants. And there are general exceptions to this rule, but mostly the big exception is for small companies. So if you gross less than 5 million, you would be exempt. But if you're a bigger company, you would have to comply. In April, Japan approved some changes to chemical rules, and they just published this again in July, the beginning of this month. These changes are coming about because of the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants. So the order designates those two as Class 1 specified chemical substances, which need authorization to manufacture and import. It also lists a number of products which businesses are not permitted to import, which contain Class 1 substances. Of interest here: water repellent and oil repellent textiles and clothing. They also mentioned floor coverings. There's other things like chemical chemical products like cleaning agents, paints, varnish, adhesives. Enforcement on this begins October 22nd of this year. On January 6th, the United States Environmental Protection Agency issued final rules to reduce exposures to certain chemicals that are considered persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. For most of these that are listed here, they are prohibiting the manufacture, import, and distribution and commerce of products containing these chemicals, with some exceptions for each. The exception to that is the last one, PCTP. They do say a limit, so PCTP concentrations are at or below 1% by weight. And for this chemical in particular, EPA calls out rubber products and sporting goods and athletic goods manufacturers. In total, there were 5 rules. There was another one that I didn't put on here because the limit was applicable to fuel additives. In January, Taiwan issued an order to amend regulations governing inspection of textile products. These are the rules that involve monitoring the products that are on the market by random inspections and sampling purchased products. The amendment was made to reflect previous changes to these 2 mandatory standards. So they made some chemical changes, and they also expanded the age for the cords and drawstring requirements from 12 to 14. So this has been enforced since February. The Pest Management Regulatory Agency published an information note about treated articles in Canada. I think probably because of COVID, there's been more interest in using pesticidal and biocidal products or chemicals and products. So the note seems like it's really just trying to reiterate what the requirements are in Canada for the use of these substances. Treated articles are defined as a pest control product under the Pest Control Products Act. The antimicrobial preservative used to treat the article is always required to be registered. However, the agency does not require registration of some articles if they meet certain criteria. So this has to do with whether the article is being preserved by the substance or it's acting as a delivery mechanism. Regarding labeling, the claims on articles treated with an antimicrobial preservative are limited to the effects of the antimicrobial preservative used to treat the article. All treated articles that require registration must include the pest control product number assigned to that product on the product. So if they give an example, if it's insecticide treated clothing that acts as a delivery mechanism, that would require a hang tag to display the registration number. And they point out that they feel that their approach is regulated similarly to treated articles in the US and EU. Also, because of COVID, there has been a number of regulations and standards put out by different countries on textile face coverings. So Spain had put out an order making requirements to them in 2020, and then in February of this year, they repealed and replaced that. The order requires that the masks will have to be tested in accredited laboratories that can certify the characteristics of the order. The mask must indicate on their packaging which standards and technical specifications, work agreements, or other technical documents of recognized standards organizations have been followed for the manufacturer and the manufacture of the final product. Also, things like the filtration efficiency, data on breathing resistance and air permeability have to be noted to the customer. The order also makes requirements for children's masks, masks that have separate filters, and those masks that have the clear areas to allow for lip reading. South Korea published a draft to propose requirements for face coverings, which should be established under the supplier's conformity confirmation scheme according to Article 23 of the Electrical Appliance and Consumer Product Safety Control Act. The draft applies to masks that are worn for winter, fashion, or sports in daily life. The draft defines it as products worn to cover the mouth and nose made of textile, synthetic resins, leather, or fur materials. They also mention disposable masks. Safety requirements, test methods, and labeling are prescribed. The chemical restrictions include things like formaldehyde, lead, cadmium, phthalates, things that they generally restrict in textiles there. The proposed date of adoption for this was about now, so they said July 2021 or later, and the proposed date of entry into force is supposed to be about December or later. I just have a couple of slides on footwear here. I'll be finished. In October 2020, India's Ministry of Commerce and Industry approved 3 footwear orders. These were supposed to enter into force on July 1st, 2021, but now that's been moved back. So the one on personal protective equipment footwear is going to enter into force onto January 1st, 2022, and then on July 1st, 2022, the other 2 will enter into force about footwear, rubber footwear, polymeric materials, leather, and other materials. These orders generally require footwear to comply with the mandatory Indian standards, and compliant footwear must bear the BSI standards mark and the manufacturer's license number. And China has put out 2 draft standards on footwear this year, 2 GB standards. So the first one, the safety requirements for footwear applicable to footwear made of various materials, but not children's or protective footwear. This document will incorporate those 3 standards, so athletic shoes, industrial rubber boots, and rubber shoes. And they also put out a draft GB on the safety technical specifications of children's footwear, and this is for children under 14. This document also integrates 2 standards into one, so the 2014 Safety Technical Specification for Children's Footwear and the 2010 Children's Canvas Rubber Footwear. And both of them set technical requirements, test methods, and chemical limits. And that's what I have for you. That's a somewhat brief look on what's been going on this year for apparel and footwear and jewelry. I think I'm going to send it back to Sean now.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Maria, for that detailed overview of what's happening around the world in the various topics. And so the idea of Maria's presentation was to give you the to give you a very broad overview of what it is that compliance and risks can support and analytical can support in helping bringing product to market. And just to touch on this draft Chinese GB standard here, right? So if I click on the link here, and hopefully this will work. So that particular link that I just clicked on, that GB 21536-2008, is this particular standard we're looking at in C2P right now. So all of the content that Maria spoke about, you will find in C2P. And just to give you a very quick overview here, because we have some time. It's a regulation, as you can see here. We're telling you it's a regulation. This is the proposed date, the 8th of April 2021. It's got a very high approval probability, greater than 99% of coming into force. And there's also a link to where we found it, where Compliance and Risks found it. You can download the document here. You can preview the document from C2P. We will always provide you with an overview in English of what's happening with that document, irrespective of the local language. And we will call out the key scopes, products covered, the requirement types, and any materials and substances. So this saves you a huge amount of time when it comes to trying to figure out what it is happening with this particular standard or any other piece of legislation within C2P. All of the format here that you see, the overview, the scopes, the key dates, and the attachments. That's be standard across every document you will see within the tool. And there's more than 60,000 documents within the tool, all taking this exact format and all covering many, many different topics. One of the key elements of C2P is the ability for you to be able to ask questions of our experts. So you can reach out to the likes of Maria and her team and the wider team to ask questions of compliance or risks about this particular piece of legislation or any piece of legislation. So we can help you get a better understanding, a better regulatory understanding of what's happening with that document and how it could potentially impact your products. And we do this across some almost 40 different topic headings within the tool. Things like obviously all of the textile legislation, food contact materials, batteries, chemicals and products and so forth. So almost 40 different topics from around the world. And you're quite welcome to get a demo of the product. We'd be more than happy to do that for you. So at the end of the slideshow, you will see some contact details for both Mattia and myself, and please feel free to reach out to us if you would like to see a demo of C2P or to speak any more about some of the topics that were covered today. Okay, so we have some time. Actually, we're quite ahead of time. So we have some time for questions. We did ask for some questions to be submitted, but they weren't submitted. So we're going to just throw the floor open for anybody for a moment who's got a question that they might like to ask on any of the topics we discussed today. If we can't answer it here and now, we will certainly come back to you via email. So let me just open this up for a moment. If you have questions, please ask. If not, we'll just move on. So that's strange. Radu, can you help me here? Unmute everybody, please. Okay, so everybody should be unmuted. You may have to unmute personally. If you have questions, please ask. If you don't, not to worry. We can move on. Okay, so there's no specific questions right now. That's fair enough. So please feel free to submit questions at a later point.